stage, I'm delighted to introduce Joanna Lepore, who is the Global Foresight and Capabilities Exploration Director at McDonald's, who is here to deliver a speech on anticipating better AI futures. Joanna is a strategist who leads foresight and exploration for new capabilities globally for McDonald's. She helps to future-proof the strategies of one of the world's best-named brands with humans right at the center. So please welcome to the stage, Joanna Lepore.
Happy to be here with you today. I couldn't have asked for a better primer from that last presentation, which was awesome, wasn't it? So I'm going to talk to you about how AI, or generative AI, is being applied inside of an enterprise at McDonald's. So my name is Joanna Lepore, or Jo Lepore, and I lead Global Foresight for McDonald's. So what is foresight? It's looking into the future. So looking 5, 10 years out and beyond at what is happening in the world, and what does that mean for our organization? So today I'm going to talk to you about anticipating futures, but also how do you get your company to think about a better future? So what positive action can you instill? Now, I'm going to be totally embarrassed now for a minute because I am a massive dork who has put in an introduction about herself. And I was sitting there watching all these presentations going, oh crap, I'm the only one that did that. That feels really, really dorky. Let's just say it's an Australian thing to do. So my name is Jo. And I'm from Australia, which is where I'm from on the left-hand side, Melbourne. And I now live in Chicago, so I work out of the head office for McDonald's in the headquarters there. And of course, now I'm in Montreal. I don't know why I threw all these images in there. It feels really silly now. That's my podcast as well, which I do on the side if you're interested. QR code. Now, what is foresight? What I can tell you is that oftentimes when you're talking about trends in the future, people sort of say, okay, what is the next hot thing? What is the next hot trend, as someone asked just before? And so you say, well, okay, what's happening with the metaverse? Or what's happening with AI? And you kind of come in and out, focusing on these big topics that are emerging and that are hot and that your board is really interested in. So that's a trap, and we try not to get sucked into that. And in fact, I can tell you right now that quantum is going to be the next thing that we're going to be talking about, probably in about 2 or 3 years. The other thing that we're often pegged at is this fortune teller, right? Like we can predict the future, and oftentimes those futures are pretty bleak. So that's why I have this awesome Simpsons meme here around these pessimistic, these futures that are downers, because we're dealing with so many negative things when it comes to the future right now. The reality is that I can't predict the future, nobody can predict the future, only a fool would try. So that's not the game that we're in. What we're trying to do is to anticipate what's going to come in the future, which feels really hard right now because the world feels more unpredictable. So the question is the world more unpredictable today than it was in the past? The answer is yes. So all of the data is telling us, as you can see from these really depressing stats, that we have more conflicts worldwide now than ever before in history. We have more protests, so more upheaval, more division, more polarization in the world than ever before, and that is causing a decline in the global peacefulness index. So there's a lot for us to deal with. Now, that's the data, but we can see this, we can feel it every day. When we open our news feeds, we feel the complexities of the world in all of the issues that we're managing as business leaders. So it feels like the world is moving at a really, really fast pace, and in many cases, it is. There's a word for this. It's VUCA. So I love to do this when I'm presenting. So hands up who knows what VUCA stands for. Okay. That's not bad, not bad. It's a little higher than what I normally see. So VUCA obviously is the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world that we live in. It's a term that was actually coined coming out of the Cold War to describe the state of the world then. And arguably, it's just as relevant today as it was back then. So what we see is that this is impacting how our business leaders, so how global CEOs are looking at the pace of change. So I'm setting some context up here for you because technology is the biggest thing that they are most concerned about. Of course, we know that almost half of CEOs, according to the PwC CEO survey, which I highly encourage you to read, it comes out every year in January, has told us that they are worried that their companies isn't going to even last in the next decade. Why? Because they're worried that they won't be able to adapt their company to fit the pace of change. That's where this stat comes in. The pace of change is really defined by those long-term megatrends, those macro forces of change that are seemingly coming at them out of nowhere. What we know is that they are saying that that is all about technology. Technology is the number one thing that they feel is going to disrupt their industry and is moving faster than anything else. More so now than before, although that has been the case for a long time. That is even higher than changing consumer preferences, or as you can see here, government regulation, and higher than climate change. So technology is top of mind. And when you're talking about generative AI, on the far right there, you can see the stat that they see this being really disruptive for their specific industry, which is why you can see that 80% of organizations are investing in it quite significantly. But when we look at the curve of innovation, which I know that many of you know, this beautiful S-curve, what we know is that we're pretty far down on that curve, so we're not quite as advanced as what we think we are. Now, my data science team were like, when you create this S-curve, can we have a copy? I'm like, listen, I just sketched this really quickly. This is not scientific. But what it is based on is data of where AI has been and where it's going. So what we know is that we have this huge proliferation of all of these technologies and all of these new models that are launching every few months. We are going to reach market saturation and a lull in innovation. What that means is actually good stuff, because it means that the innovation window is going to open up right before that lull starts to happen. And we're likely to see a new type of innovation inside of AI that's really going to boost what we're starting to see today. Now, there was some talk earlier today about super intelligence that might come from AI. And I think it was Ramon, was that his name? He was talking about how in the next 2 to 3 years, we expect this super intelligence in AI. Now, the famous Jeff Hinton would argue that it's closer to 20 years. Now, what I want to show you is that 20 years ago, our biggest method of listening to music was the iPod. So the iPhone wasn't even out 20 years ago. So the pace of change in 20 years itself can be very, very fast. But consider this, half of the world's population today does not have access to the internet, still today. So when we're talking about access to data and when we're talking about commercialization of AI, it is a privilege that not everyone in the world has. So what's important is not necessarily to predict the future, but to plan for the future. Because if you're not planning, then you're planning to fail. There it is. Okay, and so let's talk about the future then. So there's a very famous quote by Jim Data that said, "Every useful idea about the future should at first appear ridiculous." So that's what we're looking at. For many people, AI, generative AI, super intelligent AI seems ridiculous, which is why we have to pay attention to it. So this is what we do inside of our Foresight team in collaboration with other parts of our business. We look across the long and the short-term impacts for our organization. So as many of your businesses probably operate as well, the majority of our business is in that center, so they look at 1 to 3 years. We look sort of 10 years, 20 years, sometimes 30 years. Also, my clock is not working, by the way, so I'm just going to keep talking. I'm just going to keep these guys back here for the rest of the evening, if you guys don't mind. So what we look at from a very long-term perspective from those macro forces of change is if you think about something like a steep model or a steeple model. So what's happening with society? How are cultural norms changing? What kind of polarization and division do we see? What kind of technological innovation is emerging, but also what are the new patents? Who is investing in that? Is the government backing R&D in science and technology? What's happening with economies and how is that impacting how companies are able to invest? How is that impacting startups and entrepreneurs? How is climate change and potential science innovation or problems from an environmental perspective impacting what we can do? And then, of course, how is all of this governed by politics and regulation? I just went through the steep model there for you. Then we bring that down a level for our business, and of course I'm not going to share with you exactly what the trends are for McDonald's, but what I can say is we serve 65 million customers every single day across the world. We're in over 110 countries around the world. And so when we're looking at trends, it's quite complex. It comes to life in many different ways. It comes to life differently in Canada than it does in Paris. So what we try to do is to marry consumer needs and behaviors, so really understanding anthropological and cultural needs of people, industry movements and innovation, not just in our competitive set, but around it, and then the external pressure that's coming at us. We marry those things together to try to understand what's happening in the future. So the question is the future already here? Yes, it is. Another famous quote by William Gibson, the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So that's what we're paying attention to, those signals of change, as we call them, that give us an indication of where the future is headed. That's what I'm going to share with you now, with 3 kind of projections of what we see playing further out into the future, using examples of today. So the first one is a future where AI is more invisible. So what do I mean by that? We know that over the last few decades, technology has become much more intuitive and just naturally embedded into our way of life. If you think about how technology is moving from something that we hold to something that we wear to something that eventually will move up to our heads. This is the natural evolution of technology just feeding very naturally into our lives. So, of course, I start with an outdated example already. Technology is becoming your personal coach. So we see in the last few months alone, over 3 million chatbots generated from OpenAI's system. 50% of people say that they prefer to talk to a chatbot than a real person. So there's a real need for this. People want to minimize human interaction if it doesn't serve a purpose, if it's not meaningful, if we can outsource some of those tasks. So what's really interesting about Inflection AI is that obviously, they've been split, and Mustafa Suleyman has now moved into Microsoft. Microsoft has invested over $13 billion in OpenAI. And as the news announced in this, in this Inflection AI purchase, they have literally been eaten alive by their biggest investor. So why is this interesting? Because we see a monopolization happening, not just with chatbots, but with AI in general, and we'll come back to that. With technology becoming much more invisible, we see AI proliferating into healthcare and medicine. We heard a little bit about that today in the presentations. So what we see here is a greater automation of some of those tasks that give greater access and more accurate health tracking to individuals. So the example here is from Forward Health, and these care pods that they've created, which is essentially what they say is like a giant iPad that you walk into. It automatically scans you for $99 a month and gives you a automated health service. So what's interesting about that is that at the moment in the US, it's a 26-day wait for you to see a primary health care physician. So imagine if you could just walk into one of these and get your blood test readings and then send it off for the expert advice. We also see technology becoming much more intuitive, so much more naturally integrated through things like the Barracuda BeMind mirror, which is a company out of France. They displayed this alongside prior models at CES every year. And what this is a mirror that essentially reads your facial cues, so how you're feeling and what you say and how you say that you're feeling, to give you a prescription of how you can adjust how you're feeling based on what you eat or what kind of meditation you should take. Now, this isn't something that you can buy for your home, but it is something that is being embedded in things like hairdressers and pharmacies. So again, much more intuitive way for us to take an existing thing that people are familiar with and embed AI into that. How we tell stories is being changed with the use of AI. So obviously, there's a lot being spoken about right now with the integration of AI in creativity and writing, and what potentially that means for us as human beings who are very naturally creative. The example here is from Hype Novels, so from a company called Silvernode, I think, from San Francisco, who has created this ability for us to tell stories in a different way using generative AI models. So they've done this because it's what they call trippy storytelling, so it's much more immersive, but it takes old stories that people just have stopped reading that can be retold in a modern setting. They've also given this access to young storytellers and authors for them to get their stories out in new and modern ways. So it begs the question, how is our creativity changing with AI becoming more invisible in our storytelling? And then the last one here is obviously how technology and how AI is feeding into our wearables, the technology that naturally we use and wear every single day that is becoming much more connected and integrated. So this company, Nothing, from the UK, has created these AirPods, which are now integrating ChatGPT, connected into the Nothing phone, very creative name. So these two things talk to each other. So when you're listening to something with your AirPods, it automatically connects into ChatGPT to answer your questions. So a greater connection means it's just easier for you to integrate that into your behaviors. So what we know about human behavior, so this adoption curve of AI, is that when people can build that habit over 6 to 8 weeks, when they can move it from their short-term memory to their long-term memory, when it's a benefit to them, that's when it sticks. So AI is heavily reliant on these types of things to make it as easy as possible to swap out those behaviors. All right, so let's talk about a future where AI is actually helpful. So not just subbing out what we're currently doing, because who asked for that? Maybe nobody even asked for that. What about solving some significant problems in the world? Why don't we start with health problems? Healthcare and, for example, metabolic diseases, which are projected to impact half of the global population by 2050. I'm talking about, of course, diabetes, kidney disease, heart disease, mental health issues that are already impacting a lot of people, probably a lot of people in this room, and will continue to grow. So this company, January AI, has developed this predictive app that essentially tailors it to you. So we heard about digital twins just then. You create a digital twin of yourself on this app, and it helps you to predict what kind of a blood glucose spike you might have based on what you're going to eat. So I can scan my Big Mac, and it'll tell me what kind of a reaction I'm going to get. So quite compelling when we talk about people taking control over their health. Another example is AI becoming our friend. So in this age of loneliness, where we're seeking greater empathy with other human beings, this Breast Cancer Society or charity from the UK has created this campaign where they take secondary breast cancer sufferers, so people who have cancer that has spread to other parts of their body. It's incurable, so they have little hope. They've given them a little bit of hope. So Helena Awake, who is pictured here, has said that in 2030 she would like to be with her son when he's getting married. So maybe she won't actually survive that, but it's a story that's being told to help raise funding for this charity. Another example, climate. Obviously, climate is really important. Notco has their Giuseppe AI app, which has created an alternative for the green sea turtle, which is still being consumed in many traditional cultural meals, like the turtle soup in Peru. And they've used their AI app to create a replica. So the texture and the taste of turtle meat that obviously doesn't impact the dwindling turtle population. So they've done that in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, amazing. Last one, and this is a big one. It's around equality for AI. So what we know is that the AI market and commercialization of AI is dominated by private organizations in 2 countries, the US and China. 70% of the commercial growth of AI is going to come from those 2 countries where the AI developers are going, where the research is going, where the funding is going. So it begs the question, if those are the countries that are defining the future of AI, and it's being defined by the English language, what does that mean for the other countries and the equality that we're giving access to for growth opportunities for them? So Mistral AI is a company that's creating these multilingual models. We see Cerebras creating one for the Arabic language. We see the Japanese government creating one with katakana and hiragana. So a greater foray into creating a more equal AI future. Okay, 1 minute left. Listen, I'm definitely going to go over. No questions, sorry. I have the depressing slides coming up now. So what about a future where AI is out of control? Because it feels certainly like AI is a little bit out of control now. So first and foremost, what we see is a continuation of scamming. So AI as a scammer. So bad actors who are using AI to scam people bad actors in general is nothing new. But what we know is that it's becoming a bigger issue with the use of AI. So things like the Yahoo brothers, the Nigerian brothers who are using deepfakes to scam with romances of people, or the angry girlfriend, which I think is a little bit of a funny example. So it's an app where you're trying to appease an angry woman with words of comfort, and you can sign up to a subscription model so that you can have even more tries at appeasing this angry woman. So maybe not a less overt scamming example, but an example of where money is being made off the back of people suffering. The second is AI bullshitting. So obviously, what's happening at the moment in the opinion pieces that are being said about AI is that there is an exaggeration of the capabilities of generative AI and a lot of the startups that are in this space. And in part, that is because if you think about Cognition Labs and the Devon video that came out and the backlash of how accurate was this, or even Google DeepMind's GNOME, where they discovered material that actually wasn't new material. Where bullshitting happens, it negatively impacts the entire AI industry. So there's that, but then there's also lying, which is different, because lying is actually knowingly taking the truth and twisting it. And we see this happening with elections right now. So 64 elections are taking place this year across the world. Over half of the world's population is going in to vote. In India, this has just started, and what we're seeing is the Prime Minister's videos created with AI to send fake messages one-on-one to an individual in India. This is important because we have over 800 million people who have access to the internet, and YouTube is their #1 platform. And we see this growth of misinformation and disinformation being fueled by AI in the political landscape. And of course, we know from the World Economic Forum that it is the #1 biggest short-term risk in the world right now. So it's a big one. Okay, then we have AI depleting. And this was touched on before. I was really happy someone asked the question in the room around data centers. And the answer was really, really kind. My answer is slightly less kind. Data centers currently make up the biggest greenhouse gas emissions out of any industry, higher than the aviation industry, which of course gets a really bad rap for this. And the biggest issue with depletion, of course, in data centers is that we just don't know how much AI uses. Literally, you ask any company and they can't accurately tell you. And then last one is dilution and synthetic data and how that might impact the type of information that AI is trained on. We know that there is 7% year-on-year data that's getting added to the internet. These AI models require 200% data year-on-year to be trained. So synthetic data is the future, and it will impact what we see and how these models are built. So I'm going to run you through some really rapid-fire examples of how McDonald's is using AI, because I know that's what you came for. So what we say at McDonald's is that the best way to predict the future is to create it or to invent it, as the famous quote goes. So these are things that we're experimenting with and exploring to better impact the quality of life of our crew members and our customers. So one is our restaurant crew. So at the moment, they have these manuals that are printed inside of their restaurants. If I want to make an apple pie and I'm new and I'm 16 years old and I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, they have to look through these physical manuals. So we're creating these chatbots that they can talk to. They get videos played to them to help them with that process. Another is placing your order. So we have these conversational AI chatbots that you can order from. And I had a go at this actually speaking in Polish to it, and it recognizes it, translates it for me. So imagine the multilingual populations that we now have that could benefit from this to make ordering easier. And then lucky last, which is the most important point, is that we have now a center of excellence that's been created, which is allowing us to really think about how we employ AI in an ethical, a responsible, and a careful way in respect of our ambitions in this space. So I'm going to skip over my scenario planning exercise because I can see that I'm getting shooed off the stage. But one thing I will end on is to say that despite all of the complexities and the pros and the cons, we believe that a great future is in store for us with superintelligence. So the intention is to really think through some of those questions and to face into some of those complexities and hopefully create a better future.
Thank you, Joanna. I'm sorry to be the stalky time police, because that was fantastic. Thank you very much. Please be a big hand to Joanna Lepore from McDonald's. Thank you.